If you own a Silverado, a Sierra, a Tahoe, a Suburban, a Yukon, or an Escalade with the 6.2-liter V8 under the hood, I need you to stop what you are doing and listen to this. There is a defect hiding inside that engine right now that General Motors has known about since at least 2021 that has already spawned a federal lawsuit and that the company has never issued a recall for. Not once. I have seen this failure walk into my shop on a truck with 41,000 miles on the odometer, and I am going to show you exactly what to check before it happens to you. Let's get one thing straight before I go any further, because GM has done a very good job of muddying the water on this. There are actually two separate problems hiding inside these Generation 5 small block V8 engines, and the automotive press keeps blending them together. The first one is a rod and main bearing defect that got so bad, so public, and so dangerous that GM finally issued a recall on it in April of 2025 after NHTSA opened a federal investigation. Trucks were stalling out on the highway at 70 miles per hour. Some caught fire, that one made headlines, and GM was forced to respond, even if their fix was just switching to a thicker viscosity oil instead of actually replacing the defective parts. The second problem is the one nobody is talking about, and it is the one I want to focus on today. It lives inside the lifters themselves, the same lifters responsible for activating and deactivating cylinders through GM's dynamic fuel management system. And unlike the bearing issue, GM has never recalled a single vehicle for it. A customer of mine, a guy named Rick, who drives for a regional delivery contractor, brought in his 2022 Silverado 1500 with the 6.2-liter L87 back in the spring. The truck had just under 39,000 miles on it. He told me it had developed a light tapping noise on cold start that went away after about 10 seconds of running. Most owners would ignore that. I did not. I pulled the oil, checked it for metal content, and found fine metallic debris in the filter. 2 weeks later, that truck was throwing a P0300 random misfire code and running like it was missing a cylinder. When we pulled the valve covers, we found exactly what I expected: a collapsed lifter on the passenger side bank, one of the cylinders responsible for deactivation under dynamic fuel management. Rick was 3,000 miles outside his powertrain warranty. GM quoted him $9,400 for a short block replacement. Here is what is actually happening inside these engines, and it is important you understand the mechanism because it changes how you should be listening to your truck. The L87, along with its 5.3-liter sibling, the L84, and the 6.0-liter L96, all use General Motors' dynamic fuel management system. Unlike the older active fuel management that just shut down 4 cylinders under light load, dynamic fuel management can deactivate any combination of up to 7 of the 8 cylinders depending on demand. To do that, General Motors engineered a much more complex lifter assembly with more moving parts and tighter tolerances than a traditional fixed lifter. According to the ongoing federal litigation filed in the Eastern District of Michigan, those lifters were built from lightweight materials that were not durable enough for the wear cycle they are subjected to, and in some engines they were installed in the wrong position relative to the camshaft lobe, which throws off the clearance tolerances General Motors' own engineers designed around. When that clearance is off, even slightly, the lifter body starts to wear unevenly. Eventually, the roller inside the lifter can spall, or the lifter itself can collapse. When that happens at highway speed, you are not just looking at a dead cylinder, you are looking at metal debris getting pumped through your entire oiling system, and that debris can take out your camshaft, your bearings, and anything downstream of it in a matter of minutes. The lawsuit itself has been sitting in federal court since December of 2021. That is not a typo. GM has known there was a problem with this lifter design for going on 5 years. Just this past March, a federal judge denied the plaintiff's request to split the case into two separate actions, which means the litigation covering both the AFM engines from the prior generation and the DFM engines like the L87 is going to move forward together as one sprawling case. That is a good thing for owners because it keeps the pressure concentrated, but it also tells you something important. This has been in the courts for half a decade. GM has fought it every step of the way, and there is still no recall. Compare that to the bearing issue, which took less than 2 years from public complaints to an actual recall once NHTSA got involved. The lifter defect has had years longer to fester in the public record, and GM has been able to keep it out of recall territory because unlike a bearing failure that can strand you on the highway without warning, a lifter failure usually gives you a warning tick before it turns catastrophic. That distinction matters to a regulator deciding whether something rises to the level of a safety recall. It should not matter to you because a $9,000 repair bill does not care whether NHTSA calls it a safety defect or not. So here is what you actually need to do, and I want you to do this before you hit 40,000 miles, because that is roughly the window where I am seeing these failures start to show up in my shop. Start the truck cold before it has run at all that day and stand outside the driver's door with the window down. Listen for a light ticking or tapping sound in the first 10 to 20 seconds of idle. A little bit of lifter noise on a freezing morning that clears up almost immediately can be normal on any pushrod V8. What you are listening for is a tick that lingers, that gets louder under light acceleration, or that comes and goes intermittently once the truck is fully warmed up. That intermittent tick under load is the signature of a lifter that is starting to lose its internal clearance. Next, pull up your fuel trims and cylinder-specific misfire counters using an OBD2 scanner. Even a basic $40 Bluetooth unit will show you this data through most free apps. If one or two specific cylinders are consistently showing higher misfire counts than the others, especially cylinders that correspond to your engine's deactivation pattern under dynamic fuel management, that is not random. That is a lifter telling you it is on its way out weeks or months before it fully collapses. Third, every single oil change, and I mean every single one, have your mechanic cut open the old filter and inspect it for metallic debris under a bright light. Fine silver or gray flecking in the pleats is your earliest physical evidence of lifter wear, and it will show up before the check engine light ever does. I have caught 2 of these failures early enough to save the customer from a full engine replacement, purely because we were cutting filters open every service interval instead of just tossing them in the recycling bin. If you are shopping for a used Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, Yukon, or Escalade with the 6.2-liter L87 right now, this changes how you inspect the truck before you buy it. Ask for the full service history and specifically look for any documented lifter, tick complaints, misfire codes, or engine work in the records, because a dealer is not going to volunteer that information. Get the truck up to full operating temperature, then shut it off and restart it while it is still hot, and listen again. A hot restart tick that a cold start does not show is actually a more concerning sign in these engines, because it points to a lifter that has already developed play once oil viscosity thins out. And if the seller cannot produce oil change records showing consistent intervals with a quality full synthetic, walk away, because these DFM lifter assemblies depend heavily on proper oil pressure and cleanliness to function correctly, and neglected maintenance accelerates this exact failure mode. If this kind of information is actually useful to you, hit subscribe, because I cover GM, Ford, and Stellantis defects every single week that these companies would rather you never find out about. And drop a comment telling me if your L87 has ever ticked on you, because I want to know how widespread this actually is beyond what is showing up in my own shop. I want to be fair to GM here because the story is not as simple as GM sat on their hands and did nothing. They did recall the separate bearing defect once federal pressure forced their hand, and for 2025 model year engines, GM has stated the manufacturing issue behind at least some of these bearing failures has been corrected at the assembly plant. But that recall and that fix have nothing to do with the dynamic fuel management lifter problem I just walked you through. That litigation is still active, still unresolved, and as of right now, there is no recall, no extended warranty program, and no official acknowledgement from GM that the lifter design itself is the root cause. Until that changes, the only protection you have is knowing what to listen for and catching it early. Because the difference between a $400 lifter replacement caught at the first tick and a $9,000 short block replacement after a full collapse is entirely about how closely you are paying attention in that first 40,000 miles. 20-plus years of pulling wrenches has taught me that manufacturers will always wait as long as legally possible before admitting a design flaw, and the L87 lifter issue is a textbook example of that pattern playing out in real time. You do not have to wait for GM to catch up. Check your filters, watch your misfire data, and listen to that cold start every single morning. Your engine will tell you it is in trouble long before it actually dies if you know what to listen for. Take care of your truck and it will take care of you. I will see you in the next one.